Uh, Thank you. My name is Beth Cholmondeley. I go by Beth, uh, or Lady with the Long Last Name. I want to thank you for inviting me to be here today. Again, Kim Stilley was really sorry that she couldn't be here. It was one of those last minute things. So it's a last minute thing for me too. So I apologize if I kind of stammer on some of these things. What I would like to do today is, I know that there's a lot of things that are going on and a lot of things that are unsettled and a lot of things that you probably have questions on. What I'd like to do is, I have a PowerPoint that was provided to me to do. What I'd like to do is kind of go through that, but I am here to answer questions that you have. So if you do have any questions or start thinking of them, and we will try to, or I will try to answer those questions for you. Now, I don't know everything. I always say that I'm pretty good at finding the answers, but I definitely don't know everything. So let's get started. We started in 1970, so we've been around for 4 decades now. And one of the major reasons that we were founded was because of all the worker safety and health issues that there were. That there were a lot of people that were dying at their workplaces or getting sick. And so we wanted to do something about it. And this is what has happened with our fatality rate since we began. Now, it started, we were having quite a few fatalities when we started, and now we're down to, I believe it's way too many, but still, I'm sorry. What I do know is how many we've had in this region in the last couple of years. And in Region 7, Region 7 consists of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and then Iowa. Now, Iowa is a state-planned state, which means that it is run by the state, and then the federal government, or federal OSHA, oversees that. But the number of fatalities that we've had in this region in FY15 was 47, and then in our fiscal year 16, it was 46. So we're hoping that that trend continues to go down. Our continuing mission is to make sure or lower the number of workplace injuries and illnesses. One of the injuries are pretty obvious. One of the things that we've found is that illnesses are not quite as obvious. Oftentimes those don't show up for years after the employee is exposed. So what we want to do, and what we try to do, is a 3-pronged approach for this. And the first one is enforcement, which all of you know we do go out and do inspections. That has been a real emphasis in the last few years. But what we also want to do is outreach. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, is to give you the information that you need so you can provide safe workplaces for your employees, so that you know what is going on. So that is another one of our prongs. Also, compliance assistance, and I will talk about this more, but we do have a lot of different ways that we can provide assistance to you and in your facilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about enforcement first. These are the top 10 violations, or the most cited violations in the OSHA standard. The first one is fall protection. The second one is hazard communication. Hazard communication used to be first, and now it's fall protection. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The reason fall protection is one of the things we really look at is that we have more fatalities in the United States as a result of people falling than any other injury. So that is one of the reasons that we really push fall protection. Also, I'll talk a little bit later about a new standard that is going to be involved in fall protection. Here we have scaffolding as the third, respiratory protection, on down the list. Want to emphasize that it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that employees are safe in their workplace. Prevention is one of the things, it is the cornerstone of the way to make sure that employees are safe. We want to make, and this is something that we're really pushing, is that preventing an injury is much better than having to clean up after an injury. Prevention. This was a study that was just done. It costs almost $200 billion each year in the economy for workplace injuries and illnesses. The value of prevention is it saves lives, it prevents injuries, and it saves you money. Now, this is a draft report that they just put out just a couple of years ago, maybe in the last year or so. And what it talks about is it discusses successful employers, what employers who are having success in their programs, what they do, how they're doing it. It also, one of the things that it also emphasizes small and medium employers. That is something that it looks like this administration is wanting to also push, that a lot of times the larger employers have the money, et cetera, to be able to complete their safety and health programs. But it's harder for the small employers and the medium employers to get the same type of program working. So that is something that I'll talk a little bit more about our ability to help you with that. Also, one of the other things that we've found is multiple employers on the same work site. Oftentimes, one will have a program, another one will have a program, but there is no coordination between the programs. And that's something that we really want to emphasize and work at and help you work at. Core elements of a safety and health program, I'm sure you've seen these before. They seem to change the names every once in a while, but it's basically the same thing. Management commitment, worker participation, hazard assessment, hazard prevention and control, education and training, program evaluation and improvement, coordination and communication on multi-employer work sites. The one part that I find that when I was a compliance officer and when I work with people now that is missing in these is the program evaluation and improvement. A lot of companies do their program, do the training, but they never go back and evaluate the program to see if it is working and where the holes are in the program. I will tell you, when I was a compliance officer, oftentimes I would go out to an inspection, and one of the first things that a compliance officer will ask for is your safety and health program. And when the manager would go, oh yeah, let me see where that is, and they would walk over to their bookcase and they would pull it off the shelf and blow the dust off of it, I knew it was going to be an interesting day. So that's something you need to keep those up. One of the programs we've just started is the Safe and Sound program. This is a new one. Again, we're working with the small and medium-sized businesses on this. What we really encourage is that every business have a safety and health program. This will be emphasized here soon in between June 12th and 18th. And so you'll be hearing a lot more about this. There is also a web page on our website that is just about this program. It has a lot of information on it. It has some information about basically how safety pays, how much fixing things will cost you less than having an injury or illness. how to get started. I know sometimes it's just hard to get started on these things and how to go from there. So, and there's a lot of resources on this page, so I would definitely recommend that you get on our web page and look at that. I'm going to do a little sales pitch for our web page at this point. It is www.osha.gov. I may be a little biased, but I find that it's probably one of the best web pages for a government web page that I've seen. There's a lot of information on there, and I find that it is pretty helpful. One of the new things that have come up, well, new, it started in January 1st of 2015, was the reporting of amputations, hospitalizations, and the loss of an eye. Now, this is a new requirement, record-keeping requirement, that talks about you must report these hospitalizations, amputations, and loss of an eye within 24 hours. Now, it hasn't changed for fatality. Fatalities must be reported to us within 8 hours, but the hospitalizations, amputations, and loss of an eye needs to be reported to us within 24 hours. There's a lot of different ways you can report these. You can call our office if it's within working hours, and you can go right to our webpage to ask for the office, to get the office numbers. You can also call the 1-800 number, and that is 24 hours a day. If you can't find the office number, you can call them. They will take the information from you. Also, you can report it online if you want to do it that way. So we tried to make it as easy as we could as far as reporting these. Now, there will be some basic information that you will need to give to us, the pretty obvious stuff, name of the establishment, location, the name of the employees that were affected, brief description of what happens, and the most important thing is a contact person and a phone number, because oftentimes we will need more information about the incident, and we need that contact information. Now, this has been a big deal for a lot of people. We have adjusted our penalties. This is the first time since 1990 that we've done this. Most other enforcement agencies, in their regulation, their penalties had a yearly adjustment with the consumer inflation index, price index, but we did not. So our penalties stayed the same for 40 years. So here are the new penalties. Now, this adjustment was effective August of last year. They go up at the price index at the beginning of each year. Ours this year on the new ones went into effect January 17th of this year. It'll be adjusted annually, so they may go up or down next year depending on the consumer price index. So now, a serious or other than serious posting requirement will cost you a little over $1,200. Repeat, $126. Failure to abate is over $1,200 per day. So this is something that is new for us and we're adjusting to, as well as everyone else. Now to switch gears a little bit, I'd like to talk about our whistleblower program. Employees have certain rights under the OSHA requirements, and they have a right to report unsafe conditions. They have a right to report injuries. They have a right to be part of an OSHA inspection. And they also have a right to ask for PPE. So those are the rights for employees under OSHA. This is so that employees are able to have a safe and healthful workplace and be able to report to us if they don't feel they have one. Now, the big deal is retaliation from the employer because they reported. These things are bad for business. This is bad for the company. It may cost you money if we find that it is valid. It also costs a lot of time because we do have to do an investigation on these things. And it costs morale and a lot of other things. But I want to read off here what we consider possible retaliation. Now, retaliation is if these things happen after an employee does the things that I talked about before. If they report an injury or an illness, if they report a hazard, that type of thing. If they are part of an inspection, and then there is retaliation. Retaliation can include writing up a worker for something they've done that didn't happen before, suspending an employee for being part of an inspection, reducing hours, changing the work function, demotion, harassment, or laying off. Now, those are some of the things that we consider retaliation and some of the things that we look at when somebody calls us. Now, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about compliance assistance. We've helped a lot of people in a lot of different ways over the years. And this, I believe, this is just for FY15. So we've had 21 million people visit our website. I'll swear that at least 1,000 of those are me getting on our website. I probably get on our website at least 2 or 3 times a day to find things. We also have a 1-800 number that you can call to get help. You can report things through there. If an employee can call that and they can connect them with the local office if they want to make a complaint or they have questions. We also, this is something we've only had in the last few years, is we also have someone that can speak Spanish. And we can connect them, employees and employers that feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish, and we can have them talk to another person that speaks Spanish. This is something that we've started recently in the last maybe 4 years, is the email request. You can go on our website and you can ask a question through email. Personally, the only thing I ask is if you do that, please put in some contact information, because oftentimes there's not quite enough information there for us to give you a good answer. And so I have found that that is very helpful when I have to answer these. But I know that there's a lot of people that would like to be anonymous and get their get their answer anonymously. One thing I would like to tell you, though, is that we don't look people up. If you call and you have a question, we want to be able to provide you with that information. We're not looking to go out and do an inspection at your facility. If you have a question, that's not what we're looking for. I don't want to say this the wrong way, but basically we're too busy for that. So we're not looking at your caller ID. We're not wondering if we should go out and do an inspection at your facility if you call and you have a question. I would much rather be able to answer a question for you and give you that information so that you could fix it and not have to have an inspection and not have somebody come out and do an inspection or somebody to get hurt or injured. That's our whole point, is we want to make sure that employees are not injured. And you can do your business and you can make a profit. We try to do outreach activities as much as we can. We usually do these through the regional and area offices. Speaking of, we have an area office in Missouri. We have one in St. Louis and in Kansas City. There is an area office for Kansas in Wichita, and then in Nebraska, it's Omaha, and then the state plan state, it is in Des Moines. So that is where the offices are. Missouri was big enough to have two. Everybody else only has one. Our jurisdiction is by state. So the Kansas office covers the whole state of Kansas. Missouri is split down the middle as far as, make sure I get this right, Kansas City does the west side of the state, and then St. Louis does the east side of the state. The other thing we do is we do a lot of consultation. This is through the state, and I'll talk more about this in the next slide. What consultation is it's for small and medium employers, mainly. And how this works is it's run through the state, and you can call them up, and you can ask to have them come out and help you with either a program or to do an on-site audit, and they will come through and look for hazards. You can ask them for help with anything. What they'll do is they'll put you on a list. Now, it's kind of like it's broken down by size of company, so smaller companies do have a priority than larger companies. They come out, they will have somebody very similar to a compliance officer that'll come out and review what's going on in your facility. The only thing that is required, this is a free service, the only thing that's required is the investment of fixing the things that they find. Now, that is a requirement. If you don't do that, the company will be referred to the enforcement side. Now, I don't want to make that sound like a threat, because in the 25 years I've been around, I think it's happened twice in this region where the employer just refused to do an abatement, and we did end up having to go back, or enforcement had to go back out and look at it. So that's kind of how that program works. We also, if you were working with consultation and you come up on an enforcement inspection list, we will back out until you get completed with the consultation part, and then we may come back in. Talk a lot about our website. This is something else that we have on our website that is pretty cool. They have certain industries that they've gone through and basically done pick and choose, where you can go into. The one I know the most is for hospitals, and it has a page for the ER. It also has a page for the lab. It has a page for the laundry facilities where you can go through. It shows pictures of the hazards. It also shows pictures of the abatements for those hazards. So, which is really neat. Now, this interactive one, that can you spot all the hazards, that is new. I haven't been on that. I'm going to have to go back to the office and find out if I know all the hazards. There is an updated one on the healthcare, and it has a lot of information as far as lifting devices, etc. on it. Another program that we have is the VPP Sharps program. These are people that are the cream of the crop. They have their programs put together. They have a huge commitment to employee participation and employer commitment. To get in this program, your DART rate needs to be below the industry rate for your your industry. And it is a very neat program. How this works is you do apply to be part of the program. We have one person in our office that he does an evaluation of your program, and he will help you if you're missing a few parts to help you get into the program. As soon as your program part is approved, we come out and we do an audit of your facility. I've been on a few of these. It's a really neat thing to do because these are places that I have to admit the co-shows don't often see, where everything is really, really nice. And so we do an audit. Then you become part of the VPP program or the SHARPS program. There's many advantages, but as far as enforcement, the one advantage to this is you are taken off of any programmed inspection list. Now, if you have an employee that files a complaint, we would do that complaint investigation. But any programmed local emphasis program, regional program, or national emphasis program, your company would be taken off of that list. Another part of this, which is really neat, is that if you are part of this program, we also have what we call SGEs, which are special government employees. And what they do is they are trained, and then they are able to go out and help us with our audits. Now, the great thing about this and the whole program is the networking that you can do with other employers that may have the same concerns or problems in their, and it may not even be the same industry, but have the same concerns and problems that your industry does. And you can, I know a lot of them call each other up and are like, hey, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? So that is one of the neat things about the VPP and the SHARPS program. Another thing we do is alliances, and these are partnerships that we do with usually an industry. And what we try to do is we try to put together products or campaigns that we can do together that we can cover the whole industry. This one is a slide of the alliance that we have with the oil and gas industry. Here in this region, we have one. Missouri and Kansas has one with the Associated Builders and Contractors. We have an alliance with them. And then in Nebraska, we have an alliance with the Safety and Health Council. I'm sorry, the National Safety Council is who we have an alliance with there. Missouri and Kansas also has an alliance with the Consulate of Mexico. Oftentimes we try to get to the consulate at least once a quarter and to do a lot of training with the employees or the people who are in the consulate. Oftentimes we find these employees have not had as much training. Many times the problem is the language barrier, and if we can provide them training in their own language, that turns out to be more helpful. So that's our alliance program. We also do fall prevention. As I said before, falls are the leading cause of death as far as workers in construction. Our campaign is coming up here real soon. It's May 8th to 12th. We try to do this every year at the beginning of the construction season so that we can emphasize fall protection and ways that employees can protect themselves from falls. Also, remind employers of the requirements for fall protection. One of the things I want to talk about here is that in this region, we have a policy as a compliance officer. When you're coming and going from another inspection or you're out driving around, if you see someone on a roof that doesn't have fall protection, or if you see fall hazards on bridges, etc., we are to stop and to investigate that hazard at that time. I personally have stopped on a Saturday and walked up to some people on a roof and gone, "Hey guys, what do you think you're doing up there?" Now, oftentimes they'll come down. I mean, I've never had anybody not come down, and I am not a COSHA anymore, so I do not start an inspection, but I do give them a lecture, and I explain what type of fall protection they need. I also tell them that there will probably be somebody back here on Monday morning, first thing, to check out and make sure that you do have it. So this is something that we take very seriously in this region because we do have a lot of fall fatalities in this region. One of the places this seems to have worked very quickly is in the communication tower industry. We were having a lot of fatalities in this area, and especially in this region seemed to be a big contributor to this. It went down, I mean, we went down to 3 in 2015, and this is nationwide. So we were very excited about that. 16, we had 6. We're hoping that this is not a trend. We want to go back down to 3 or less than 3. This is another program that we have. Heat illness prevention. We call it the water, rest, shade. This is something else that we try to start late spring, early summer. We get out the word. We try to provide pamphlets. We even have small wallet cards that we can hand out to people to remind them. This is something else, also something that we're really concerned about in this region because we have had at least one fatality in the last 3 years because of heat. Oftentimes it's because the employee was not acclimated before he started working, and they go out and they try to work a solid 8-hour day without getting enough water or rest or shade, and they start overheating. One of the problems with heat illness is that you just feel tired, and the person is like kind of ignores the symptoms until it's too late. So that's something that we really watch here, and we're really trying to emphasize, especially since we've had so many deaths in this region. One of the other things that is new, well, new as in the last couple of years, is there's been an emphasis in workplace violence. This seems to be an increasing problem, not a decreasing problem. There seems to be 4 industries that have a higher rate. Healthcare and social assistance is the big one. There's a lot of hospitals. There's a lot of daycare facilities for adults that have real problems with the patients or the clients hitting them, biting them, scratching them. Also retail, food service and accommodations, transportation, warehousing, and then education. Those are the top 4 industries that have this problem. What we've done recently is we have put out a booklet, and we've also put out, just recently, we put out a new directive on how we're going to handle this if we do an inspection in these areas. What we're asking people to do is have a policy statement, have a written program on how you're going to handle any workplace violence that you have in your workplace. It falls under prevention. If you know what you're going to do if it happens, if you know what you're going to do if it starts cropping up, it's a lot easier to handle than after it happens. So we are asking employers to start these programs, to be aware of the type of controls that they can put in for these programs, so you're not behind the 8 ball when this does start happening. Also, we ask for the same thing with every other program we do, employee participation, something to look at, and a review of the program to see if it's working. I guess one of the things that I forgot on here is training and education of your employees. That seems to be a real important thing, especially in this program, because we found that if employees realize that the employer has a program and that they're going to do something if they start acting up, that the tendency to act up may decrease. One of the other programs we have going on is protecting young workers. Now that it's almost the end of the school year, it's about time for all the high schoolers to start working. And we have found that these young people are twice as likely to end up in a hospital than somebody over 25. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening now. I got through all the programs and stuff. Now we're going to talk about what I kind of came here to talk about. The first thing I'd like to talk to you about is the regulatory delays. These are two, beryllium and silica are two of the standards that were put out in the end of the Obama administration, and they are being reviewed, and the beryllium standard will not start until May 20th now, so it has been delayed for further review. Now, let me back up. How this works is that if an administration, which the Obama administration put out a lot of standards and compliance stuff right at the end of the administration. Under Clinton, they came up with a new procedure where if these standards come out within the last 90 days of the last administration, they can be reviewed and decided if they want them implemented or, I hate to say rejected, but implemented or not in the next administration. So this new administration has 90 days to decide if they like the beryllium or the silica standard and how they're going to implement that. So as far as the beryllium standard, it's still under review. So they're looking at it, they're wanting to see if they're going to change it, how they're going to implement that. The crystalline silica standard, it has been delayed until September 23rd of this year because we found it's a very, to be honest, it's a very complicated standard. And what we found is that our employers are very confused about how they're going to implement this. So we've kind of stepped back and said, okay, we need to explain this a lot more before it goes into effect. So we're trying to provide outreach. We're also working on compliance guidelines and some compliance assistance with this standard. So it has been delayed until September. We also have some court cases and some other things going on. The first one, when I talked about repealing before that the administration has so long to repeal a standard, the Volks rule is what we've been calling it, was part of the new record-keeping standard, which basically said that the employer had to update and keep their records on their OSHA 300 log updated for 5 years. That was part of the new record-keeping standard. What has happened is one piece of that rule has been repealed. And that is the part where basically OSHA can only go back 6 months to look at your records as far as if they're accurate or not. So basically, if you want to play Russian roulette and not keep up your OSHA 300 logs, we can only go back 6 months to give you a citation. So that's kind of the way that this rule is now going to be implemented. The second one is what we call the delict decision. This is brand new. This applies to companies that have process safety management, PSM. As part of that, these companies are supposed to do an audit every year. And as part of that audit, they find the deficiencies within their own program. Now, they are supposed to do a timeline as far as when these deficiencies are supposed to be fixed. What COSHAs have done in the past is they've gone out. One of the things we ask for is the audit. If we find out that the employer hasn't fixed something that they have on their audit within the time period that they said they we would cite that paragraph of the standard. Well, the court ruling was that we can't do that anymore. So we kind of thought about it, and we've decided that this is how we're going to handle this now. What we're going to do is we're still going to be asking for these audits. We're still going to be looking at them at the timelines. What we're going to do now is if there are deficiencies that haven't been fixed or it doesn't look like they've been fixed in these reports, what we're going to do is we're going to go out and look to see if that deficiency is still there. If that deficiency is still there and it falls under one of our standards, we will cite under that standard. So we will be citing for the hazard itself, not for the program deficiency. So the other thing that's going on is there is real concern about the electronic record keeping, which basically every employer is supposed to, depending on their size, it depends on if you're just putting in the 300s or you're putting in the 301s also, that by, I believe it's June 30th or June 1st of this year, you were supposed to put in your 300 logs electronically. Well, this, there was I'm sorry, I can't remember who went to court on this, but anyway, the first decision was no, you can't do that. Now we're appealing that decision. It has been delayed until June 5th. So it's still up in the air if that's going to be required or not. I will tell you that we have a page on our website that has a thing about electronic record keeping and how to put that in. It's not up yet. So you couldn't put them in if you wanted to at this point. I do have a few people that call me every month or so and say, is it up yet? And I keep saying, no, but it should be up soon. So stay tuned for this one. I have no idea what's going to happen with this. So maybe we'll find something out after June 5th. The last one I have on here is just happened recently. And in this case, what happened was that we went to court. It was a poultry processing plant that had a comprehensive inspection. And the way that we expanded the inspection, which is an expanded inspection is basically when we come in, let's say we had a complaint at your facility, and we come in, and one of the things that we ask for are your 300 logs, and we look at those. If we see a lot of the same type of injury, and they're big injuries like amputations, crushing hazards, things like that, we have the authority to expand that inspection, and we do what we call a wall-to-wall. And what that means is we look everywhere instead of just in the area where the complaint was. Well, the poultry plant said, wait a minute, we don't think you should be able to expand the inspection. So we went to court. And the first lower court's ruling was, you're right, you can't do that because you don't know if that's a violation, so you can't do that. We are in the process of appealing that decision. This could be very interesting for us as far as how we handle our inspections from now on. So stay tuned on that one too. Now there is one standard that is new. It's out and we're working on it and working through it. It started January 17th of this year. It's the walking working surfaces. It changed. What we tried to do on this one is now the construction and the general industry standard marry each other or mirror each other in certain aspects as far as fall protection, scaffolding, stairways and ladders. And the need to have fall protection is the same in general industry as in construction. It used to be that in general industry, we used to joke, it used to be in general industry you could fall 6 feet, and in construction you could only fall 4. Now it's you could only fall 4 unless you're on a roof, and that's a whole different thing. But the one thing that this standard is doing is we used to only have basically 3 ways to protect people that were in the standard, and that was scaffolds, nets, and fall protection. So what we've done is we've expanded that, and I'm going to have to read some of these off because I haven't gotten them all memorized. We still have the guardrails, the nets, and the personal fall protection, but now we've added to this list personal fall arrest systems, positioning systems, travel restraint systems, and ladder safety systems. Now this ladder safety system is going to be a big deal. It's a huge change. What we're basically saying is on ladders, I believe it's over 25 feet, that in the next 20 years, let me repeat that, 20 years, you will need to have a ladder safety system as part of your ladder system. Now the reason for this is that we found that especially on fixed ladders, tall fixed ladders that had cages, which is what we had before, that many people who were falling inside these cages were getting very bad injuries. They were either dying or there were a lot of broken bones on these. So the new technologies of these ladder safety systems have become so much better that we're basically phasing out the cages and going to these ladder safety systems. As I said before, this rule started in January 17th. Now you have 6 months to train your employees on fall protection on this. The anchorages for these rope descent systems that we're talking about, if you have one of those, you have a year to put those into place. The fixed ladder system, you have 2 years since the publication to start working on that. And as far as the ladder safety system, i.e. the ladder safety system versus the cages, we have 20 years before that gets done. So basically, if you have a cage on a tall ladder and you need to do some maintenance on it or it's not in good shape and you start to replace it, go ahead and put in the ladder descent system instead of doing your cage. Here's some of the information again on our webpage. We have a lot of fact sheets, Q&As, what it means, things like that on there. So this is another one of our web pages. It has a lot of information. I'm sure that we're putting together also a publication on this. Now I want to do some selling for you, for us. These quick takes are a really neat thing that you can get through an email. It does have the latest news on there. It'll give you the updates of what's going on. It'll also talk about what's coming up. It'll talk about initiatives. It'll talk about new publications. It'll give you our new websites. And you can sign up for that on our website, on OSHA.gov. The other place that has a lot of information is our publications. I will say that this last administration, this was a real emphasis for them, that publications and communication was a big deal. I think we put out more publications in the last 8 years than we had in any other administration. So these are great publications. One of the things that I'm going to talk about that I think is a really good publication is we have a lot of small entity guides now. And what they try to do is they try to explain the standard in small words, is what I call them. And a lot of times, I recommend these for not only small companies, but large companies, because it does explain it in a way that can be understood easily. Because I know, I look at our standards and I'm like, what did it say? So I understand where you're coming from when you find that our standards can be confusing. So these small entity guides are an excellent resource, as well as some of the other stuff that we have. This is my name and my telephone number. If you want to get a hold of me, I'd be more than happy to try to answer any questions that come up for you now or later on. If something comes up, like I said before, I'd rather be able to answer a question now and have something not happen, or to give you some explanation of what's going on so you understand what's going on. I got done in an hour. I'm sure somebody has to have a question for me. Yes. Right, what she's asking is more information about the climbing safety system on fixed ladders. You have 2 years to get that system on if you don't have a cage. If you do have a cage, you basically have 20 years to get the cage gone and the system in. Now, as I said before, if you're having maintenance on that cage, etc., I would recommend that you go ahead and get rid of the cage and put the system in, because I just think it would be cheaper in the long run to do that. But yes, we wanted to make sure that we gave people plenty of time to replace those so that, because they are expensive. So, but yeah, you have the 2 years. If you don't have a cage, you have 2 years to get the system in, the other system in. Yes, ma'am. Okay, the question is there a place to go to get information on certain industries as far as types of hazards that are there? Is that okay? Yes, we have a couple of different ways. We do have some publications that are specific for injury industries. We also, on our website, have something that we call e-tools. And what they are, they're pages for different industries where they go through and talk about what type of programs that you probably need, what type of hazards you usually see in these type of industries, and abatement for those hazards. And one of them, I think that they showed up there, was, I know the hospital has one where the front page is basically a picture of the hospital, and then you can click on the different sections of the hospital, and it'll give you hazards and abatements for the specific hazards for each area of that hospital. So I know we have one there. I believe there's one for the poultry industry. I know there's quite a few different ones on there. Okay? Yes, sir. The question is employer-provided PPE, who pays? Okay, this is a question that comes up a lot. And it depends. I hate that, but it depends. If the PPE, like the shoes, is something that the employee could wear home or wear out and it's normal shoes, the employee would pay for that. Now, if they're steel-toed shoes, that is something that an employee would not normally go out and purchase. So the employer needs to pay for those. Now, it's also the employer's right to say you can't take those home. Now, that usually doesn't happen so much with steel-toed shoes, but in places that have to have a particular type of footwear, like boots, that have to be clean, et cetera, oftentimes they will have, the employer will have the employee take those off before they go home. Now, on the steel-toed shoes, I will tell you that a lot of companies, what they'll do is they will set a limit as far as how much that they will pay towards those shoes. It has to be at least the amount that you could get a pair of shoes for, but I know some companies, what they do is companies, i.e. OSHA, what they do for us is we're allowed a pair of steel-toed shoes, I believe it's once a year, and there's a limit as far as how much the government will pay towards those shoes. If you want to get a really nice pair of shoes and spend more than that, that's up to you. But the company or OSHA will pay a certain amount. Did that answer your question? Okay, does that help? Okay. And the same thing with PPE, clothing and things like that. If the clothing is something that the employee would wear home, the employer doesn't have to pay for it. Now, if it's FR clothing for like the electrical industry, where to reduce flashovers, that we expect the employer to pay for. Yes, ma'am. The question is, have you seen any injuries in regard for basically people wearing steel-toed shoes get injured because of the steel-toed shoes? Yes. They used to talk about that a lot with the steel toes, where the steel toe crushed down and hurt the employee's toes. We found that that's more episodic and kind of you hear about it a lot, but you never really see it. Does that make sense? So no, we haven't seen many because of the steel-toed shoe. I will tell you that a lot of the new steel-toed shoes, it's really not a steel toe, it's a fiber component, and those are even stronger than the steel. They don't seem to do the crushing that the steel does. So no, I haven't seen many. Yes, ma'am. The question was, as far as the electronic filing for your 300 logs, is that still due July 1st? Is that correct, July 1st? The politically correct answer for this is yes. They are still due. Practically, is that going to happen? I can't imagine it's going to. It's not even up on our website yet. I can't imagine if we got that up on our website today and we tried to have every company in the United States put in their OSHA 300 logs into that system, I can see our computer system just smoking. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So I personally expect that there will be an announcement for a delay here soon. I don't know when it's coming, but internally we're kind of like going, I have to admit that internally we're kind of going, somebody say something, because we have to come out and say speeches and say, yes, it is still due in June, and we know better. So So yes, it's still in effect, but there's got to be something coming out soon that will say that that was delayed.
Since you're doing politically correct answers, can you give us any observations? Obviously, as Connell Insurance, we write a lot of workers' comp. We help our clients. Missouri allows employers to take a drug testing penalty if the employee fails a drug test and so forth. Can you give us any insight as to, obviously, we kind of know where that was going. We know the current status and possibly any future status or where that might end up at?
Okay, as far as the drug testing, that is part of the new record keeping where basically we're talking about retaliation and discrimination against employees. In the rule, we said that you can't discriminate or you can't do drug testing for employees if they've after they've had an injury, and we consider it discrimination or retaliation. That's a better word, retaliation. Then we immediately put out an interpretation about what that meant. And basically, it was very long, very complicated, but the summary is that basically, if an employee has an injury and reports the injury, and this is still in effect, and being on drugs would have contributed to that injury, you're allowed to drug test. An example, if you have an employee that's working on a fork truck and they crash the fork truck and they're injured, you can do a drug test on that for that employee because him driving that fork truck under the influence is going to make a difference in that injury, in the reason for that injury. And what we're all about is trying to identify hazards, and that's a hazard. Being under the influence of drugs while you're driving a fork truck is a hazard. Now, if you had somebody, the opposite end, if you have somebody that files an injury for, let's say, carpal tunnel syndrome, and they're an office worker, well, there's nothing related between being under the influence and doing office work and having carpal tunnel syndrome. We would see that as retaliation for that employee to have a drug test. Is that clear as mud? That's about as clear as I can make it right now. Yes, ma'am. The question is, if the fork truck driver causes an accident but isn't hurt, can you drug test him? My answer to that is, if your policy says so, yes. Now, make sure you have a policy that says that. Make sure that this is not the first time you have used that policy. Make sure the employees know that they're going to be drug tested if they have an accident. Now, and I'll go back. This is kind of related. When I was a compliance officer, I did a lot of construction work, construction inspections. And the employer would always complain to me when I found employees that wouldn't wear their hard hats. Perfect example. And I'd go, guys aren't wearing their hard hats. And the employer would say back to me, well, I can't make them. And I just wanted to hit them. But I'd say, what does your disciplinary program say? Well, we have it. It was like, enforce your program. Send somebody home because they're not wearing their hard hat for a day. All of a sudden, everybody will start wearing their hard hats. The same thing with this. If it's in your program, if you can show that you are doing everybody the same way and you have used your program, you are okay. And that's what we want you to do. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Yes, ma'am. Okay, the question is, if your policy says that you're going to drug test everybody, is that incongruous with our new policy? Yes, it is. I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, to tell you the truth. I'm being honest. I would say, and something that I have not, what I would say is this. Make sure that you document what you've done in the past, the reason that you're doing it. Yes, that's what I would recommend. I will tell you that I have also heard, and I have not been able to research this, you may know the answer to this, is there are some states that have a law that you are required under workman's comp to drug test everybody that has a claim. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Missouri is not one of those, but some states, Arkansas specifically, just south of us, but several other states, they have a requirement that you can, they don't necessarily have a requirement that you have to do it, but you can become certified by the state to have a drug testing program, and you've got to follow the procedures, drug test everybody, be consistent, be fair. You can't pick and choose. And if you do that, then the state requires your insurance carrier to provide you a credit on your work comp premium.
Okay.
So that would obviously be a gray area there.
Yes, it would be. What I would say that is, if your state requires you to do a drug test, it's going to be very hard for OSHA to say you can't do a drug test on that. I mean, I would definitely contest if you got a citation for that. I would go to an informal conference and contest that, because if it's a state law, we can't supersede a state law. Yes, ma'am. We have. It's a very, very gray area. I don't know what they're going to do with that. I have to tell you that many of us were surprised when it came out. I would say that in accordance with our interpretation right now, it requires that basically what it's requiring is that you do not discriminate against your employees because of having an accident. And one of the ways that you can discriminate against your employees is to do drug testing when the influence of drugs would not affect the injury that they had or the way that they got their injury. That is the way the interpretation is right now. Yes, you are absolutely correct. It is a very, very gray area. I'm hoping that soon that we have some clarification on that, because I hate to come out here and tell you that it's a very, very gray area and it depends, but that's where we are right now. So I am not much help on that one. I would recommend that if you do go out and if somebody cites you for that when you're out and you have an inspection, my recommendation would be to contest that citation. Come to our office, talk to it, and work that out, because it is a very, very gray area at this point. And I was no help with that answer. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you very much, Obeth.
Wow, thank you.